Hello and welcome back to the Premier Injuries channel. Today we're talking to Paul Morisson, who will be our expert on all things Leeds. But before we get into it, make sure to like, share and subscribe to the channel because we've got so much Premier League analysis coming up. We've got a video for every team in the Premier League next season, even those that have been promoted. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No, it is a pleasure to talk about Leeds. I think they're one of the most visually pleasing teams. But I got you on because you do amazing work on the Leeds That podcast. Do you want to tell the listeners about some of the stuff that you put out there?
Yeah, so we started 2 years ago. Just there's four lads. We have had season tickets for a long time, and we decided that we would record the random ramblings that we normally have on a match day and lay them down. And as much for us, if not anything else. But I think there's a few people give us a listen every now and again. We wanted to do something a little bit different, so we were doing a few monthly podcasts with games, and then we've interviewed a few people and got lucky. We've interviewed Adam Forshaw last year, who's a Leeds midfielder. Just before the season resumed after the lockdown, and then in October we interviewed Calvin Phillips, which was obviously before he became a global megastar and nation's darling, Calvin Phillips, but he was always a darling in our eyes. So we've had some good opportunities, and we tend to do match day podcasts and just chat about how things are going.
And you know, you talk about ramblings before match there. Before we started the interview, we had a little ramble and a discussion. You're actually almost becoming a Leeds player. You're training to do the Great North Run. You might be ready to do a bit of murder ball next season. But do you want to tell us about that charity event that you're going to be involved with?
Yeah, personal endeavour. On the Sunday, the 12th of September, I'm running the Great North Run for Bliss, which is a premature baby charity in memory of my little boy Jack, who sadly died when he was 6 days old. They raise money to make sure that people like babies like Jack have the best chance, and families have the best chance of having a long and full life. So just a little plug for that. If anyone did fancy throwing anything in their direction, the link is justgiving.com/fundraising/Jack's GNR21, as in Jack Great North Run 21. So throwing myself into training for that for the summer, and pretending like I'm anything like in a Bielsa pre-season to give it my all.
I mean, it's a fantastic cause, and brilliant for that. We'll retweet and kind of try and raise awareness ourselves here from Premier Injuries. But I mean, have you learned anything from the pre-season things that you have seen with Leeds? I mean, have you been trying any of those techniques that Bielsa kind of brings to the players?
Well, what's funny is that he, I think for the first few weeks they just run before even bringing a ball into it, and we've not had a very good pre-season results wise. I went last week to Blackburn and we drew 1-1, and we lost it against Real Betis at the week, and then we got hammered by Ajax last night. But someone summed it up by saying, if Bielsa could get away with it, he wouldn't have pre-season friendlies. He doesn't care for them. It's not like the result. Everything else in that is kind of irrelevant. I think in our last pre-season friendly last year, we lost 3-0 to Stoke before the season started, and then came out of the blocks against Liverpool on the first game of the season. So pre-season's a really funny one, because I think Bielsa sees it about stamina and building up that match fitness rather than about the overall tactical side. Their mind's probably worrying about tactics for the Manchester United game next Saturday rather than anything else that could possibly be going on at the moment.
Well, let's talk about next season then. You must be really excited because obviously Leeds promoted last season and they set the Premier League alight. So kind of looking towards the new season, you must be buzzing.
Yeah, very much so, because obviously We'd been out of the Premier League for 16 years, and I got my season ticket in 2002-3, which was our penultimate season in the Premier League, and like just after the World Cup, we basically sacked O'Leary, sold Rio Ferdinand just because I bought a season ticket, and then the whole thing imploded, and then we had these wilderness years, and then that's why our podcast called Leeds That, because it's kind of something seems like good's got to be happening, and then typical Leeds sort of thing leads that is that's the saying. So just as we've got the best team we've had in 20 years, there's a global pandemic, which means that we're not allowed to go and watch any of the games. We don't see us lifting the trophy. We go and have this amazing Premier League season. So fingers crossed we maintain that momentum, and we're able to get back into grounds and enjoy supporting the team in the Premier League.
Now, one of the first questions I always ask people in these previews is kind of a description of how the team plays. We're kind of going bare bones here for people that might not have watched and had the pleasure of watching Leeds of last season or even in the Championship. So how would you describe the tactics of the team?
It's very high pressing, very high intensity, man-to-man marking, regardless of where the man is on the pitch. A lot of keeping the ball on the deck as much as possible, moving from front to back as quickly as possible. It's just really intense, in your face all the time, and because of this fitness and the way that it is intense, it often sees us through in the last kind of third of matches when other teams start to flag a little bit because they're still doing that. And even if I think there's probably the Manchester United game where we're 6-2 down or whatever, and it's the 95th minute, and people are still right up in people's faces, playing like it's cup fixture, and always wanting to win. Like when we spoke to Calvin, he said like they weren't necessarily setting targets, but the target is to win the next game. So it doesn't matter what happened in the last game; it's just to win. We play every game to win, which you'll find in the Premier League. Not many teams do. Well, very few teams do. Like, in fact, I don't think there is. Maybe Manchester City, but beyond that, I doubt there is another team who set out to win every single game that they played last season. That doesn't matter if we're at Manchester City away, which we won, or if we're at like, well, this year Norwich away or wherever kind of teams, or Sheffield United, wherever it is. Every game we play to win, and that is a rarity in modern football. If you look at any Mr. Mourinho team when he sets up to play out his dull nils, and it's not, they don't necessarily play to it's play for a draw. Solskjaer does this all the time. Get to the 60th minute in those big fixtures and hope to nick a chance. And we're not like that. Every game we play to win, and it's refreshing.
And the data proves it as well. The team were the most aggressive pressers in the Premier League last season, 7.17 PPDA. The next closest team were Liverpool with a 9.13 PPDA. Will this be ramped up, though, even more with a normal pre-season after COVID? Can you see the team getting, even more aggressive out there?
Potentially, because although we've only made one major first-team signing during this transfer window so far, I think an important part of it is that the players who we signed last season have had virtually a full pre-season this time, obviously with the exception of Robin Koch, who had slightly less time because he was away with the German national squad. But generally speaking, Rodrigo will have benefited from having a full pre-season. Rafinha will have benefited from having a pre-season. And these are players who, on their day, are frighteningly talented.
And kind of going into this pre-season analysis, has anything changed? Have the tactics or the play style, anything that can be of note for the fantasy Premier League community?
Well, Bielsa's thing the entire time, we play a very similar way. The only real tweak we make is if we're playing against two strikers, where we will play a back three rather than two centre back pairing, where Phillips will drop back within. But generally speaking, Bielsa's style is, if plan A isn't working, do plan A better. There isn't a plan B. And I think a lot of people think he tweaked things and tightened things up in the second half of the season, but actually it's probably that we had more consistency and in terms of the injuries. We didn't get to play Diego Llorente until the second half of the season, and when he came and had a consistent run of games, we were much better. There was only maybe one or two games at the back end of last season where in fact, there was only once in the second half due to substitutions that we were able to actually play all of last season's summer signings on the pitch at the same time. So yeah, other than the fact that Diego Llorente is injured again, hopefully we should have that a little bit more stability and a bit more luck with injuries this season.
Well, that does bring me on to the next kind of point, because last season the team obviously renowned for the fabulous attack, but sometimes were criticised for defensive performances. And looking at that underlying data, the numbers from the back were not great. They're about 15th, 16th for XG conceded, shots in the box conceded, things like that. Do you worry that the team, the second season syndrome could hit Leeds this season and be punished for being a bit too attack-minded?
No, because all that data was really in the first half of the season. Like we were very poor in the first half of the season in that way. We were basically going tit for tat, conceding the same amount of goals as we were scoring. But in the second half of the season, that was completely changed. We actually had Melier broke Joe Hart's record for the highest amount of clean sheets for an under-21 goalkeeper. So it's easy to see that as a narrative, and it definitely was the truth in the first half of the season. But if you look at our form from Christmas onwards, it's top four form. I think it might have been the last 15, certainly the last 10 games. There was only Liverpool got 2 more points than us. We were second across the full form table, and that include games against Tottenham, Chelsea, Manchester United, Manchester City. So from January onwards this year, we really did tighten things up, and the end of the season probably came at a poor time for us. So although a lot of fans are very worried because they're relatively fickle about the poor pre-season results, the proof will be in the pudding when we get going again next Saturday at Old Trafford.
Well, that brings me nicely on to my next point. That was exactly this. In the last 9 games of the season, the defence was remarkable. There was a lot of really good underlying data from there. XG conceded, less goals per game, big chances per game, all went down. And it kind of showed that proof in the pudding, exactly the phrase that you said there, that Bielsa was doing it. But was this all down to injuries then? And does that make you a little bit concerned that the squad is not deep enough for the Premier League as of yet?
Again, I think we wanted to sign Ben White last summer, but Brighton wanted £50 million for Ben White, and we signed Llorente, Koch, and Rafinha for £48 million instead. So we have Liam Cooper, who's the captain, who generally will probably be first choice, regardless of the fact that probably technically most would say that he's the most limited of the 4 centre halves. But we've got but breakout star last season, out of necessity, was Pascal Struijk, who came through. So we actually probably Bielsa has every player capable of playing 2 or 3 outfield positions, probably with the exception of Bamford, which allows us to cover for things generally. We're probably slightly light at fullback generally, but again, because it's a strange one, because I'm going, right, well, if Ayling was out or one of the centre-backs was out, Ayling would play at centre-half, where he's been trained to do for several years. If Firpo, our signing at left back's out, then he'll play Dallas at left back. He played Cooper at left back at some point yesterday. So they're all. That's how when he signs new signings, he brings them in with the ability to play. Like he's been playing Koch in the defensive midfield role in pre-season because Calvin's had very limited game time, but it would be Koch or Struijk behind first choice Calvin Phillips, who will play every game if fit and eligible. So I don't know. It's a strange one. There are options. There's definitely options. You would prefer stronger options, but I don't know how strong, how deep can you run a squad in the Premier League and keep everybody happy? Like it's easy looking at Manchester City going, wow, they're bringing in Grealish and Kane, but they're gonna have to shift a couple of players to make way to compensate for that. And I think a few people have said, well, Villa are making a few good signings. But when you look at a lot of teams, beyond that first 11, 15, or maybe 18, the players who are behind that, you wouldn't necessarily say were the players who you would be expecting to start in a first choice squad for. So I don't, I guess the long winded answer is I don't know. I think the feeling at the moment is that we're 2 or 3 players short of a squad that would really push on from where we were at last season. But you never know. Will consistency help? We'll see.
Now, one of the things that might help consistency going into next season is set pieces. The team actually conceded the most from dead ball situations last season. Is this something that Bielsa has worked on or indicated that he is working on in the pre-season?
Not especially, but again, I sound like a broken record. That was definitely a huge issue prior to Christmas. Sometimes it was easily exploited. It became a really boring thing because obviously we watched the games on the telly and the commentators every corner would be like, well, Leeds are poor at defending, and inevitably a lot of teams would score a lot of goals and put their big, strong centre halves up against some of our smaller players. And it like Bielsa said, I can't outcoach a physical mismatch. So I think it came down to just the consistency and having the settled team, which meant that we were so much more solid from those situations in the back end of the season. So he won't have worked on it specifically and highlighted that as a weakness. I think he just believes that with his first choice team in and on a game to game situation with the man marking, his probably way of doing it is his entire thing is if they don't have the ball, they can't score, which is why we have the most possession in the vast majority of the games. We cover the most distance because it's the old adage of the best form of defense is attack. If we keep the ball and we play in the opponent's half, then we're reducing the chances that they have to score, and that's kind of the way it's done.
And this does give me hope for the team going forward into next season because, like you said, that they finished the season so strongly. But in attack, I mean, it's something else. Do you think that the team can hit the ground running this season? That they seem to, get really into their groove towards the end there. And the other big thing for them is not a lot of the players have gone off to a Euros or to a Copa America. They've kind of had this time to build pre-season fitness. Can they really hit the Premier League positively?
Yeah, it's a really strange one because I don't really hugely want to say it out loud because I'm not hugely superstitious, but I'm fairly sure I'll curse it. But if you look at the Manchester United team, they played Queen's Park Rangers last weekend and basically played under 18s because Harry Maguire is still on holiday and other players like that are away, and you've got Fred and players like that have gone to all over the globe, and they have a huge percentage of that compared to the amount that we've had. So you think, maybe we can exploit something here, but then people would probably be grounded in the pre-season results as well. So yeah, there is potential for it because the vast majority of the squad was there and has been training for this longer amount of time compared to the vast majority of the teams above us who finished above us last season. So it is an opportunity. I'm fairly sure they'll have been working on the tactics for it. I couldn't tell you what Manchester United team's going to start next week because so many of their players have been away. And there's all this uncertainty over Pogba, etc. So it'll be I don't even know that all their players maybe came back at the start of this week, but less than a 2-week run up to for the entire pre-season. So it's definitely different for a lot of teams this year. Well, when was Kane due back? Yesterday, but didn't go to Tottenham, did he? So yeah, a lot of unsettled pre-seasons where I was hopefully, despite the the performances, well, not the results. Yeah, maybe it'll play into our hands, but can't guarantee it. It's football.
Yeah, anything can happen in football. One of the other positive maybe is the work ethic of Calvin Phillips. A lot of people have focused and created narrative that obviously Leeds might struggle without him in the team. But he came back early, didn't he, to join the pre-season training?
Yeah, so Calvin's been back a few two like he had 11 days off after the Euros. They went on a quick holiday and he was back, and he's a fit player. I know he has a niggly shoulder injury. There's a worry that probably requires surgery at some point, but he's a fit lad. He's a committed lad. He will want to do his best for Leeds, and he will play next Saturday if he's fit. He will play, and that's a huge bonus for us. That we actually have a slight selection dilemma, because if Llorente, even if Llorente isn't fit, we've got these four centre backs who've all had to be first choice at some point last season, who you can make a strong argument for playing. So we will see what he ends up opting for.
But the positive is there that Phillips can be in contention, whereas other teams, as you mentioned there, Manchester United, they're missing the likes of Maguire, question marks over Shaw, Cavani. There's quite a few that it's not so certain. But one of the certainties that I'm definitely looking forward to watching this season is Junior Firpo. I mean, looking at his numbers over the past 4 seasons, he's managed some top data for both Barcelona and Real Betis. His XG and goals scored are top 10% data in terms of Europe's top 5 leagues, and his speed and physique means he's basically, that puzzle piece nicely slipping in to the amazing architecture of Leeds. Do you foresee a big season from him, maybe from a goal scoring perspective, not just defensively?
Well, I think one of the biggest bonuses of pre-season has been the sort of the form of Jack Harrison. He's come back in and I think Jack Harrison's got the best, must be in the top 10 easily of first touch in the league. Jack Harrison was probably overlooked, definitely data-wise overlooked for the England squad this summer, because he had a brilliant season, but he's already commented on that link of up on the left-hand side with Junior Firpo, because Jack Harrison does a lot of the tracking back and the dirty work. Last season he had to play a lot. We didn't actually technically have a left back last season. He played with Alioski, who has left the club now, who he joined us as a left winger, and he played a lot of left back, a bit of wing back, and a bit of random mad Johnny position. But having a firm fixed left hand side when fit, I think they can be a huge strength for us. With the Rafinha, Ayling on the right hand side, Firpo, Harrison on the left hand side, that does look as a first choice, if we can get them playing consistently, like a really, really strong option for us to have.
And Jack Harrison himself, as you said there, he's had some amazing kind of data, one of the best kind of chance creators, but he's also getting shots in the box. He does it all, and he's brilliant. And in terms of just kind of bring it on to direct fantasy Premier League discussions, he's priced really, really cheaply in comparison to Rafinha and Bamford, who are a little bit more expensive, but are also that brilliant. I mean, would you say he is as integral to the attack as those other three, or is his role a little bit reduced and therefore kind of justifies that slight reduced price tag?
No, I would go all in on Jack Harrison with that slightly reduced price tag, because he does get a lot of assists. He got a fair chunk of goals. He'll score you. I had Jack Harrison in all of last season. He's a worthy one. Also, Rodrigo, who, when you sign someone for £30 million, you expect them to play. He really came into form at the back end of last season, and could be in and amongst things. And he's cheaper than I think it's much cheaper than like Lacazette and Aubameyang, and but the best value for money one in terms of points per value for Leeds is Stuart Dallas. The question mark for Stuart Dallas is, where does he play? But that would have been the same this time last year. Stuart Dallas played every game. He was brilliant for Leeds last season. I think he's down. I think last season they had him down as a defender, but he plays in midfield a lot of the time and gets the goals. Those are the kind of players you want. So he'll line up on your fantasy team as a defender, but he'll actually start for Leeds in midfield and have a chance of getting in amongst the goals and the assists. And he's an absolute grafter, so he will put the points on the board.
Unfortunately, this season they've reclassified Stuart Dallas.
Yeah,
so this is why my attention's a little bit on Junior Firpo, because I think he might be that kind of player, as you mentioned there, linking up with Harrison. He is priced at 5.0. He is playing, as a left back, but I think he will be involved with the attack a lot. Kind of bringing it towards the end of the discussions then here. As mentioned a little bit earlier, the team had a fantastic run towards the end of the season. In those final 9 games, you mentioned it yourself, only behind Liverpool. But there is a little bit of a worry going into the season. Llorente is injured. Struijk had a bit of a problem, but it's been kind of confirmed that it was just a knock and precautionary taking off. I mean, could that cause a few problems before the season has begun if Llorente is out of the starting 11?
Yeah, the worry with Llorente is that he came in, he was injured, he struggled to get in. He started at Chelsea, went off injured, started at Newcastle, went off injured, and then managed to get his run of games and was really good. So he looks a classy defender, Llorente. I mean, he was there. He went with Spain. He didn't feature, but he was there with Spain all summer, and he is a really important player for us. I personally would have him as first choice out of the centre backs, in front of all others. But having said that, Robin Koch has done well at times. Again, German international. Pascal Struijk had his breakout season, and Liam Cooper is the club captain. So when one of them's injured, you've got the scope of the other 3, and they're still competing. There's still big competition for places. When 2 of them's injured, and you're starting to struggle. If at times we had 3 or up to 4 out, when you're starting to have to bring Ayling into centre half and move things around. So I think any of them in out is a concern. You're always going to get injuries. That's football. Every squad's going to get injuries across the full season. That's what happens. There's hopefully enough cover. But yeah, Llorente is out of our centre backs is my first choice. So hopefully it is precautionary more than anything else.
And are you excited for that start of the season run? There's a few kind of difficult fixtures in there. Obviously, it's Manchester United to start things off with. But, I mean, are you filled with confidence that the team can push on and keep that magnificent run from the start of the season? If you look at those first few fixtures, you've got in there Everton, Burnley, Liverpool, Newcastle, West Ham and Watford just in those first 7 fixtures, of course, with Manchester United to start it all off with. Do you think that the team can, pick up quite a few points and be in the top half of the table, or maybe even a little bit higher?
I gave up predicting football a long time ago. I say that I predict every game. It's so open. We are on our day as good as anybody and could beat anybody, as we did last season, in a exciting attacking front foot kind of way. But equally, we have frailties that won't have disappeared entirely. So those fixtures you can look at and go, yeah, they're good. But I think they'll approach it professionally. I think there's a little bit more pragmatism in our play than there was at the start than this time last year. I don't think anybody's getting too carried away. The target is to stay up and consolidate a Premier League place and not to be Sheffield United. So if we took a couple of wins, a couple of draws and stayed out of those first 7 games, just kept things as tight as possible, then I'd be pleased with that, just building a little platform to crack on with.
So, looking at the team going into next season, we've mentioned Rodrigo, we've mentioned Harrison, we've mentioned Firpo. Are there any other players that you think that the FPL community should be aware of as a potential gem to own?
I think Rafinha shows that obviously the potential for, um, well, he's frightening, and maybe if he'd had a slightly better second part of the season, then there'd be some big questions about whether he would be looking for a big transfer this summer. So if he gets consistently at it, he will. He has the potential for that. He will score big points. I think Bamford again will had a great season. Um, I don't know. Melier, not a bad shouting goal. He got a lot of clean sheets last year, so um, I'm not sure what his value is, but it won't be quite as high as some of those top end of the league ones. But yeah, they're all integral to our team. They all play a really important part. Um, yeah, that reclassification of Dallas is just a bit sneaky, isn't it?
I mean, they do these things to mess with us. I mean, if you remember Lundstrom a few seasons ago at Sheffield United, he started off as a defender and then they reclassified him as a midfielder. I mean, another thing that maybe you'd agree that the fantasy community should be aware of as well is Leeds' incredible performances against top six sides at home last season. They were unbeaten and they had three clean sheets out of those six games as well, 50% clean sheet rate against top six. I think, any team would want that. Manchester City, Liverpool, all the way through the table. Do you think that maybe because these came later on in the season as well, that clean sheets will actually be more prevalent for Leeds this season?
I hope so. I hope, like, obviously, there was very little Premier League experience in our squad at the start of last year, and I think they learned a lot as the season progressed. And despite the fact that it wasn't really a huge change in playing style, a little bit of the consistency and the experience and a little bit more pragmatism meant that in those games towards the end of the season, we were able to like we played with 10 men against Manchester City and just defended for a half, which was crazy, and then scored on the break, which was like the most anti, like that's the kind of thing that was happening to us in the championship. But yeah, hopefully all that experience from last year, I just hope that they've had enough of a break and enough of a rest despite of the Euros and the other tournaments and the other bits and pieces that have been going on, that they maintain that momentum and have enough about them um, to push on into this season and not drop away.
And would you say as well that one of the big things that will increase Leeds' output next season is the home crowd effect?
Yeah, obviously I was lucky enough to get a ticket for the West Brom game on the final game of the season last year in the ballot, but having like sometimes, like being honest, the crowd over the last 10-15 years has been as much of a hindrance as it has um as a help. I think over the last few years under Bielsa, it's like the players have to have a certain mentality, so all it can do is help. But before that, players didn't have the it's a bit harsh. Some did, some didn't, but there were some players who came in who didn't have the mentality to um, wear the shirt under the pressure of the up to 35, 40,000 Leeds fans, that the weight of expectation of the club. So this is another test for them. It's a test for them to play as a Premier League club with that expectation, because our fans have, even now, like the expectation is to be better than last year. We don't, like, you can't manage the expectations of the Leeds fan base. It is crazy. Like, if you went on Leeds social and saw like the reactions to pre-season and stuff, is bonkers. So we'll see. I hope it'll be a positive.
So, where do you think the team will come next season?
Um, you always want progression, um, and I felt like there were points. We only finished a couple of points out of the um, third level European competition thing. Like we, so I think when you ask about squad depth, if we were having to compete on a European front this season, I don't think we'd be. I felt that was much too soon. I think another season of consolidation, anywhere between anywhere between 8th and sort of 14th would still represent a decent second season of consolidation. But I know that within the club, there is an expectation of success on a not necessarily from the owners, but within the squad and the management. They want to progress and they want to push for European opportunities, whether it's the fringes of it or we shall see. So yeah, I would take comfortably staying up with some exciting football, but I know many want much more.
So I guess this is hard because you've kind of answered it for yourself there, but what would be seen as a successful season for the team?
I think for the team, they want to finish higher than they did last year. So I think they will feel that certainly seventh to ninth is obviously a like it was a tight. It was only a couple of results difference from that, so they will feel that is up for grabs. As will quite a few teams. There's probably 10 teams who will fancy a top 6 finish. There's an established top 3, 4, but the team will fancy that. Will fancy a decent run and getting into that. For I think 6th they would be chuffed with, but I think they secretly want to do even better. Not secretly, but internally.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't put it past them as well. Some of the most magnificent football that you've seen in the Premier League for a long while. The final question for you, Paul, is if you could pick just one player from Leeds for the FPL for the whole of next season, who do you think is going to perform best?
As I say, I would have probably gone Dallas again. But again, he isn't fully guaranteed. I will say probably Bamford. I think Bamford's going to push on and get 15 to 20 goals again this season. And if you have him captain on the odd occasion in the right moments, he will get you plenty of points.
Massive hauls from Patrick. I mean, you mentioned Rodrigo a little bit earlier. There's no chance that Bamford would be dropped or rotated with him then?
Well, that's what we thought this time last year, but it hasn't panned out that way. I think he's tried to play Rodrigo. He's tried in pre-season to play Rodrigo just behind him, but really, Rodrigo should be playing that out and out front man. So that's where the points may end up being shared and split. That it's not a Harry Kane kind of situation where you put Harry Kane in, you make him your captain, and week on week he is the talisman. We don't quite have that. He'll even under certain circumstances like stick Jack Harrison up front of him. Like that's the way Bielsa works. So we're possibly not. Harrison's a good one to have. He gets goals. He could get around double figures goals and assists. Hopefully Rafinha will do the same. We'll see. That's not the best answer, but there you go.
No, I think you've given a fair kind of explanation into some of the best players in the team and also the real situation with Bamford, and it'll be one to keep an eye on. But Paul, I just have to thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure to chat to you about all things Leeds. And just quickly to remind people, do check out the Leeds That podcast. So much great content there. And also check out Paul's charity run. It's a really good cause there and I think really important. But thank you so much for your time today, Paul.
No, cheers. Good to catch up.